Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the presidential contest is officially underway with the Iowa straw poll. We have a long way to go. We have a couple of professors in here to weigh in on that, and then our popular financial literacy update, Pennsylvania politics and government, in depth and in detail. And guess what? It all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, first of all, let me thank Governor Corbett and State Treasurer Rob McCord for hosting. Well, I had a little surgery on my knee. I'm back. I'm ready to go. And I want to mention something that we're going to do on this program. About every 5 or 6 weeks coming up between now and the 2012 election, we're going to get some of the state's leading political scientists, pollsters, to come in and weigh in on the presidential election. We'll look nationally, but obviously when we get into next year's primary in our state and obviously into the fall election, Pennsylvania will again be one of the pivotal states likely to play a major role in the presidential election. And two of the guys I want to have on fairly regularly are sitting in front of me. Across from me is my friend and colleague Berwood Yost. He's the director of the Center for Opinion Research at F&M, Franklin and Marshall College. And Jim Hoefler, he's a professor of political science at Dickinson College. Both of these guys know what they're doing. All right, I just gave you a big enough build-up, right?
Thank you.
Are you happy about that? Okay. Jim, let me start with you. Look, the economy being what it is, and you know as well as we all do that it normally is the big driver in any election. Mm-hmm. We've had, you know, Jimmy Carter in 1980, George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992, and now we have President Obama. The economy is worse. If things stay the way they are, how competitive do you think this presidential election will be?
Well, as you know, Barack Obama's approval rating has now dipped down into the upper 30s, the dirty 30s. Yeah. And the thing I would say, though, is, first of all, you can't beat somebody with nobody. And so a lot will depend on, obviously, who the Republicans choose. It's also true that at this point in their run-up to re-election, Truman was polling at 33%. Reagan was polling at 35%. Clinton was polling at 37%. Right. So Truman.
We're a year off. Is your point we're a year off? And some, yeah.
Right. A lot can happen.
But, but look what we do for a living. We have to talk about this.
That's right. That's right. And this doesn't. You know, no president wants to be down in here this close to an election, but it's certainly not unprecedented. And these last two guys, Clinton and Reagan, went on to win really big landslides, essentially. Yeah. So,
your take on that?
Well, I think I agree with Jim. The first point is really an important one, is you got to have somebody to compete against Barack Obama.
And we'll talk about that.
And we'll talk about the Republican field in a bit. So if there's a viable alternative, I think certainly, you know, depending on that alternative, Obama's success will be defined in some ways. I also think the state of the leading economic indicators is really important. And right now, they're not great, but he's got a little bit of time yet to turn that around. I think until about March or April of an election year, if GDP growth and economic indicator growth is positive, that usually bodes well for the incumbent. So
but it's less than GDP growth the first 2 quarters as revised, less than a quarter.
Right.
As Jim points out, we've got the president with these low polling numbers. They stay that way, and the Republican, probably whoever the nominee is, has to be an acceptable alternative. I think that's what.
That's the point. Right.
I mean, I think that's the big point you're making. Well, before we get into the Republican field, I'm going to ask both of you this question. Do you think that Pennsylvania, even though Obama won the state by 10 points, if you go back over the last couple of presidential elections, they were, you know, 4, 2.5 points. Do you see Pennsylvania as being pivotal in next year's election?
I think the answer is the same to the first question. It kind of depends who runs and whether this will be a key state or not. I think in general, we don't see any shifts that suggest that these middle Rust Belt states won't be in play at some level. Whether Pennsylvania will be a keystone, so, I don't know.
In or out, PA, important or not?
Oh, Pennsylvania's going to be an important state. There's no doubt about it. I think Obama has great potential to win this state again. But it's back to the first question: who's he running against?
Okay, we're going to run to a break. We come back. We're going to take a look at the GOP field. I want to get your sense about which candidate is likely to do well nationally, but also in our state. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by ReconnectPA.org, supporting a comprehensive transportation funding solution, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we're reviewing the presidential prospects for President Obama with a couple of the state's leading political scientists. Now we're going to run and chat a little bit about the Republican field. Berwood, let me start with you on the second segment here. Is this now basically a three-person race? You know, Michelle Bachmann, Mitt Romney, and Governor Perry. Is that? Do you think that's it?
It sure looks like it. I mean, I think there are still people being talked about as maybe being a late entrant, right?
Governor of New Jersey.
Right, Chris Christie. And whether any of those folks get in, I think there's still a general uneasiness among the Republican rank and file with Mitt Romney. I mean, he just can't seem to catch a break with those folks, so they're looking for an alternative. Rick Perry, I think, has a good story to tell about the economy and the job growth in Texas. I mean, you can debate how much of that is his responsibility, but I'll tell you what, he's got a story to tell.
And whether they're good jobs or bad jobs.
Well, look, you look at the median wage in Texas, it's right there. It's above Pennsylvania's median wage.
Is that right?
Median wage.
See, that's why I have these guys on.
Right. So, I mean,
they know things,
so
right?
there's lots of interesting nuance to that jobs picture, and frankly, that's what this election will be about. And so I think that's a story he can tell, makes him very viable. Now, Michelle can't. I don't think Michelle can
Bachmann, do you agree? First of all, do you agree that the Republican field is still unsettled? You know that Perry burst out to a pretty big lead. Pretty smart guy, skipping Iowa, which you probably wouldn't have won. Go ahead. Take
it. Well, I don't know. Let's again, we were talking about this earlier, going back 4 years. Let's go back 4 years and look what John McCain did in Iowa. Came in 10th.
Yeah.
He was just a trace figure. Nobody gave him a shot. I think it's still so early. I still think that there's room for people to jump in here. Nobody thinks, you know, Rick Perry is now a front runner, just throwing his hat in the ring here at this last minute. As these guys begin to deconstruct a little bit, and people take a closer look at Rick Perry, I think you're going to see kind of
about the record, and there are some.
It's the Fred Thompson
Berwood talked about the pros, but there are some serious cons. You know, he supported Al Gore in 1988. I mean.
He's talking treason, and he's, you know, he's kind of a secession.
Right. Go ahead.
Right. And so it's this kind of, wow, if we could just get Rick Perry in here. But if you remember what happened with Fred Thompson, I mean, everybody stood around waiting for that. I'm going to say something absolutely crazy, Berwood, and I want you, you know, why not, right?
Why not, yeah.
If John McCain hadn't run 4 years ago, and were to run now, even though the country, you know, the fiscal conservative side, I mean, just, of course, we're speculating. I think the guy, with the credibility he has, with the stature, I think it would have been a different kind of race. Or is that completely off the wall? Maybe the fiscal conservative, he's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because you can't remove what happened in the 2008 campaign. I think if he hadn't run in 2008, absolutely, he can't do it now because too much has changed. But if you're talking about the John McCain from 2000, you know, that vintage.
But could he survive the fiscal conservatives?
I mean, that's know that he can. And the war issue side of this isn't as prominent as it was 4 years ago.
People don't care about foreign policy right
and
now.
that's where his expertise.
He's also 4 years older, and people were concerned about this 4
years ago.
That's
right. Andrew Jackson and Ronald Reagan, and you know, all these, you know, maybe we're living longer. I'm getting older too, Jim,
yes,
so we all are.
He's looking younger all the time.
He's looking younger. Well, let me ask you about, Jim, about Michelle Bachmann. You know, obviously, she's pretty untested, you know, not much of a record, as we found out, which Tim Pawlenty pointed out in Congress. But she's a pretty appealing, attractive campaigner. But we haven't elected someone out of Congress. There's another point, out of the House since Garfield in 1880. Right. Isn't that tough? You study this. Isn't this tough?
I don't know. I see kind of shooting star syndrome with her. I don't want to put her in the same basket as Sarah Palin, but I will. Fairly untested. I'll say this other thing, though. I think this little media flurry about her headaches recently and having to go to the emergency room and carrying... No, obviously it didn't.
You think it didn't?
I think
no sympathy?
No sympathy, and I think that if she has another meltdown where she's in the public eye today the way she hasn't been in the past.
That's a good point.
They run her to the emergency room, and she's going to be done. All
right, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about our state PA. I want these guys, as we begin this series we're going to do, to weigh in on what they think any presidential candidate has to say to Pennsylvania voters when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, I didn't get very far when I suggested to Berwood that John McCain might do better. So let me try this one on. Berwood, you're the polling expert here. Is Pennsylvania still a centrist state, moderate state? Are we still going to elect someone? Talk a little bit about what you think a candidate to win our state has, the kind of mix of demographic.
Right. Well, Pennsylvania is in many ways a microcosm of the broader nation. I mean, we are a center-right. We have moderates and conservatives. So there are more conservatives than liberals, but most of us in Pennsylvania are moderates. And so that's the kind of message that appeals to Pennsylvania voters. I think you've got changes going on in the dynamics of the state with voters in the southeastern part who were typically Republican, who are, though, a bit more socially liberal. But certainly I think jobs and fiscally conservative right now. But the jobs issue is what's going to drive Pennsylvania voters, I think. And I think they will look for, George Bush never won this state, and Democrats have had good showings here at the presidential level, and I think Obama is still the person to beat in this state.
But you think a Republican could win?
Absolutely, with the right message.
Rick Perry, maybe, do you think?
Yeah, I like Huntsman, too. I mean, he may be
has no
long gone.
I mean,
for whatever reason.
Where's the guy going?
Who I don't think will do well here is Santorum.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he lost his last race by 17 points, and he'll do very well here in the primary, and I see him as kind of hanging back.
If it gets there, I mean.
If it gets there. But again, let's remember where John McCain was, and I see him playing this kind of last man standing thing where everybody just gets sick of these others.
Well, you think Santorum's strategy is to be the last man standing, right?
Perhaps.
I mean, hopefully that everybody...
But if you look at the dynamics of the state right now, Romney has a slight advantage over President Obama. Everybody else is basically behind President Obama. So from electoral viability, and I think what Pennsylvania voters are interested in, Romney probably presents the best contrast to the president. But, we'll see.
Depending on Perry's, as you pointed out, I'll go to Jim on this, Perry's record as governor, look, we typically like governors. Two sitting senators elected, House member not since, 1880. We elect an awful lot of governors who tout their record. Do you think that's sort of, in that sense, the best way to go after the president, creating,
Yeah, and again, Perry does do well, I see him doing well in Pennsylvania, but again,
if he doesn't have some implode moment, right?
Yeah, but again, general election-wise, these guys are all playing very much the Tea Party book, except for Huntsman, and obviously Ron Paul isn't in there. But
Ron Paul, hold it. You brought something. Ron Paul, he has no.
I don't see him having much of a
I
constituency.
don't either, but I kind of think of Ron Paul like Bob Casey.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of party, not really in tune with the party. He's a gadfly, he's an outsider, keeps running. The son of a gun. How many times did Bob Casey run?
Bob former
Senior.
governor, 4 times.
Yeah,
4 times.
and he keeps hanging around.
You know, there's
All right,
another
one quick thought,
interesting
and we're out
dynamic in this race is that the ballot races are now favoring Democrats, while the presidential approval numbers are against Obama.
Yeah. And they're pretty close. I think we're all going to have PAs. My point, PA is going to be competitive. You guys are not out of a job.
Okay.
All right. Popular financial literacy update. We'll find out what you should know to protect your credit and other things. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, welcome back to the program. And now we have our popular financial literacy update. Joining me is on this show a lot, Lonny Maurer. He's the CEO from Belco Community Credit Union in Harrisburg. Doesn't have to travel too far to the studio, about a block. And then we have Christina Mihalik. She's the Vice President of Government Affairs with the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. All right, Lonny, let me start with you. I want to talk a little bit about a theme that intermittently we've talked about. We're in this recession. Lots of people, tough times. They're into borrowing money, and sometimes they borrow money from the wrong people. Do I have that right or wrong?
You absolutely do. The payday lending community has taken advantage of major sectors of the population for years, and in fact is growing incredibly. It's just uncanny that today there's over 23,000 outlets in the United States. Just last year alone, they did $48 billion in total business, $6 billion in finance charges.
Now, when we say payday lending, that for some of our viewers who have no clue, and before we started to do this, you say payday lending. I have a credit union and a bank. The normal institutions that you would think of. What's payday lending? What does that mean?
Payday lending is the practice of offering revolving short-term loans. They're usually at outlets, not so much your banks or your credit unions.
Like a storefront, you would
go
in and...
Right. They're high cost, and they target those that really can't afford them.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean you would, okay, you go in, walk me through this. You would walk in, you would say you need money, go through how and the payment. How does it work?
Let's take a typical financial situation. An individual goes into one of these outlets and wants to borrow $500.
Okay.
They're borrowing that money only for several weeks. It has to be paid back very quickly. And usually they have to, there's a requirement that they either have to have a government check or they have to post a check as repayment for the debt. And if at the end of that 2-week period of time they're unable to pay the loan in full, the cycle starts again and the fees mount.
And so the interest rates would begin to compound. Maybe I'm using the wrong word, but they'd end up, in some cases, maybe owing in interest more than they borrowed. Is that possible?
400 to 1,000%.
Are you kidding me?
Even over 1,000%. Absolutely.
Wow. All right. Now, the credit unions, you have a program to combat that. Is that right?
Yes, we have a great program. It's called the Credit Union Better Choice Program. It's our answer to the payday lending situation, and it was created in collaboration with the Pennsylvania Department of Treasury and the Pennsylvania Department of Banking. They've been great supporters of it. We started around 2006, and we have about 81 credit unions on board. Lonny's one of them, including has done some great, has some great stories of some success stories.
How does it work?
Very simply, a member applies for a loan. We suggest, and in some cases, some credit unions require counseling before the member gets into the program. And the reason for that, it needs to be dramatized, the purpose of it, the counseling is to help them to break the cycle that they have only known or they've known for most of their lives. The process is simple. They apply. There's no credit rating taken. They pay a $20 fee, which can be financed as part of the total obligation. They enter into a repayment cycle for up to no more than 90 days. They must repay the loan in full before they can obtain another one.
So you're not going to allow people just to come in and keep borrowing and then keep getting themselves
compounding.
Deeper in problem. And the interest rates are fixed, so you don't have that problem. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, much about this other than what we've talked about. But Christine, let me ask you: how serious, in the scale of things, given all the business that you all do, is this? Is this I hear a lot of comments about it. Is it, in the scale of things, pretty serious?
Absolutely. The demand for the program?
That's what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, especially during these trying times, credit unions know their members. They know their individuals who are working at the credit union as well as families. And we have seen an increase in these types of loans because people are living paycheck for paycheck. And we usually stereotype the typical borrower as being low income, unbanked, military, or welfare to work, and we're not seeing that right now. And we do see that, but we also see a larger increase. And
so he's
Lonny
saying,
could better answer that.
Yeah. So she's saying there's a changing demographic and the people
Absolutely.
who are doing that. Is this recession related? You think?
It's definitely recession related, and it's also hitting the middle class.
All right. Moving forward. Are there state rules or regulations? I know you do government dealing with payday lending, or is it something that these interest rates?
Well, the Better Choice program, our interest rate's 18%, and I think the extra step that we have with this program is there's a savings component, where 10% of the loan that's taken out is being put into a savings deposit account.
So you're trying to urge people to save and not get into this bind.
Exactly.
Does the Department of Banking regulate this? I mean, how do these people just set up shop, do what they want? Aren't there any regulations on any of this?
They are regulated, and the Department of Banking has made it a very unfavorable climate to payday lending, but it does still exist, but they do have great jurisdiction over it. I think one important thing to say about the Credit Union Better Choice program is this is the first program in the country to offer a safe alternative on a statewide basis, and we're very proud of that.
And the program is growing.
It is absolutely growing. Ours has doubled every year that we've offered it.
All right, we have about 30 seconds left. Do you see any need for additional state laws, government relations leader here?
I think that creating a private-public partnership with the Department of Treasury and the Department of Banking, we've done a great way of reining in and providing a consumer-friendly alternative.
Okay. Hey, great update as always. All right, as always for you, thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well.